We are now going to hear a talk titled Time Will Tell, Grammaticalization of Time Expressions in Israeli Sign Language by Svetlana Dachkovsky, Rose Stamp, and Wendy Sandler from Haifa University and Ilan University. Please go ahead, you have 18 minutes.
Hello. I'm very happy to present today at this conference, and welcome to our presentation, which talks about grammaticalization and lexicalization of one particular time expression, time pass, in a Ilan Sign Language, Israeli Sign Language. So grammaticalization is usually defined as a process by which lexical items become grammatical markers. And let's take the example of Old English huile, meaning time, which grammaticalizes into a temporal conjunction while, connecting two simultaneous events, as in the example, I'm eating while watching TV. What is further proposed in the grammaticalization literature is that these grammatical items might later acquire discourse functions. For example, while can be used to show discourse contrast. While he likes eating, he doesn't like watching TV. An alternative view on the relationship between discourse, lexical, and grammar has been also proposed. And according to this view, lexical and grammatical items are born out of discourse usage. Evidence for this view comes from the field of language acquisition, as well as from the studies of new languages such as Pidgins and Creoles. It has also been speculated that in the process of language evolution, proto-words refer to whole events in a holistic way, so that lexical and grammatical items emerge through the reanalysis of proto-words. In addition to these three windows into language emergence, we can look at Ilan Sign Languages as a window into the language emergence, thanks to their unique properties. So let's talk about sign languages. In sign language literature, it's proposed that there is a preceding gestural stage in this linear view. That is not lexical items, but gestures are the starting point in this process. And then gestures become lexicalized and further grammaticalized. And there are plenty of examples for this process in a variety of sign languages. And in our talk, an example for this process comes from American Sign Language, or ASL. ASL, sign to go or move in space, is said to originate as a French gesture and then grammaticalized into a future marker in contemporary ASL. We are asking, are there alternative scenarios for grammar and lexical in sign language? Engelberg Peterson, as well as the Shan, as well as other scholars, observed that in some cases, the recruitment of a gesture into the grammatical system of sign language skips the lexical stage. In other words, the lexical stage is optional. Another possibility, though, is a more dynamic view on that process, in parallel to that of spoken language. That is, gesture is directly accommodated into discourse usage, and only then becomes specialized, either as a grammatical or as a lexical item. And in our study, we are weighing these two possibilities. We are doing this by looking at one particular time expression, time pass, in Ilan Sign Language, Israeli Sign Language. First, we will identify particular form function patterns in our data set of spontaneous narratives. We'll examine the distribution of those patterns across two age groups of ISL signers. We will show that there are three distinct variants of time pass and that these variants are distributed differently across the age groups. Their distribution provides evidence for the alternative view, which is different from the classic linear scenario. Instead, we suggest a more dynamic view on the emergence of lexical in grammar, where gestures are recruited first for discourse level usage, and only then grammatical and lexical items are carved out of discourse use. And here is the time expression, time pass, that we will focus on in our talk. It involves two hands moving in a cyclic movement in front of the signer's body. This is a very common ISL sign, but also in many cultures, it's used as a gesture, and it has also been observed as a gesture with Israeli speakers. And for this purpose, it's a very good candidate for the study of the relationship and interaction between grammaticalization and lexicalization. And here are the research questions that we ask in here. What are the different forms and functions of time pass? How are they distributed across ISL age groups? And also, what can this tell us about lexicalization and grammaticalization, which can be traced in a Yan sign language? So a few words about the language we're talking about, Israeli Sign Language. It's a Yan language, only around 90 years old. And this is a deaf community sign language, which started off in the 1930s with the foundation of the first deaf school in Jerusalem, where deaf people from different backgrounds came together, and the rest is history. So nowadays, ISL is in its 4th generation, and it's used by roughly 10,000 people in Israel. In this study, we extracted 196 tokens of time pass from spontaneous narratives produced by 27 ISL signers. And Rose Temp will tell you about our findings.
Thank you, Svetlana. Okay, so on to our findings. So our first question, what are the different forms and functions of time pass? So as Sveta explained, we looked at 196 tokens of time pass, and we coded them here for the following information. So we looked at their distribution in the narrative, that is their position in the intonational phrase based on timing cues. Now, timing cues like pauses, the speed and the size of signs, these are crucial for the identification of intonational phrases in sign languages, much like pauses and lengthening in spoken languages. We also coded for features accompanying time pass, both in terms of manual components and non-manual. Manual refers related to any accompanying movements of the face, the head, and the body. This is parallel to intonation in spoken languages. And finally, we coded the position of time pass in the discourse. That is, whether it was positioned between or within episodes. Okay, and so we identified 3 different variants of time pass, which might look similar, as you can see on the slide here, but in actual fact, they were distinct in terms of form, prosody, and distribution. And these details, the distinctness is going to be described in the forthcoming slides. So looking at the first variant of time pass, this stands alone in the intonational phrase. It's preceded and followed by pauses. It's reduplicated a few times to show the duration. It's produced with varying rhythm and a lax hand shape. It's accompanied by an open mouth, which also emphasizes the duration of the action. And it connects episodes in the narrative, appearing at their boundaries. So both in terms of its function and form, it's similar to the cyclic gesture that we see in hearing non-signers. Now we're going to show you an example from our data set. So here, this is an example of the discourse marker, this first time pass variant, produced by an older signer. So in this example, the signer is describing the period when her mother got pregnant during World War II, while the signer herself was sick and weak and became deafened. This gesture-like discourse marker occurs at the boundary of these episodes, okay? So we're actually going to have a look at the clip itself. So I want to draw your attention to looking out for the time pass variant. It will be slowed down. And as you can see in the subtitles here, should be saying, my mum got pregnant with another child. time pass is translated here as time went by. I was still sick and weak. So let's take a look. And we can actually take one more look at that. Okay, so this is our time pass, our first variant. So let's have a look at the second variant. Now, this is produced with a much more restrained movement. It's never reduplicated. It appears at the beginning of the intonational phrase, accompanied by raised brows and head. And this variant of time pass connects individual events, much like a conjunction. So here in the example, this is a signer who's describing a sequence of events which occurred after the birth of her child. And here she uses this time pass variant in order to show the temporal progression. And these are translated here as later and then. You'll see it twice in this actual example. So let's show you the clip. And again, it will be slowed down. So please pay attention to this particular variant. And we can see that one more time. Okay, and on to our third variant of time pass. So this is produced with a very crisp hand shape. It functions as a lexical element, either a noun or a verb, and it combines with other lexical items in the intonational phrase. The lexical status of this variant is reinforced by the fact that it's accompanied by mouthing of the corresponding Hebrew word. So in the actual example you'll see here, the signer is talking about cochlear implants and other hearing technology which is advancing. And if you pay attention to the mouthing on the co-occurring with the sign, then you'll see that it corresponds to the Hebrew word for advancing. So let's take a look at the clip here. And one more time. Okay. So now that we've shown you the three different variants that we have for time pass, we're going to show you how they distribute across the age groups. So we looked at their distribution across two age groups. We compared older and younger signers. In order to do this, we adopt the apparent time hypothesis, which makes claims about diachronic changes based on differences across age groups. This assumes that language users do not change their language significantly over their lifetime after adolescence. So first of all, the gesture-like discourse marker, as you can see here, is very common in the older age group, but is rarely used by younger signers. If we compare this with our time pass variant 2, the temporal conjunction, this is common in both older and younger signers. You can see this in green on the graph. And then looking at our time pass as a lexical item, this rarely appears in our older signers' narratives, but it's abundant in our younger signers. So finally.
What can this type of distribution tell us about lexicalization and grammaticalization in a new sign language? Let us summarize the change that we observe for time pass if we look from older to younger signers. While gesture-like discourse use of time pass decreases as the language matures, it is replaced by the lexical function of time pass as presented here in this smart chart. And grammatical usage is preserved across the age groups. This suggests that in a young sign language, lexical and grammatical items are carved out of discourse, as also argued by Givon, Dubois, and others for spoken language. And we can see that lexicalization and grammaticalization can be represented as two facets of the process of language emergence. What this development also shows is that the linear view from gesture to lexical and then from lexical to grammatical is not probably the only path of language development. And we can suggest a more dynamic language emergence scenario. So where discourse plays a key role. As suggested by Bowie, discourse provides a key linking element in the language emergence chain that goes from more holistic expressions, such as gestures, to more complex conventions of lexical and grammar. In the conclusion of our talk, we would like to raise a follow-up question. How do we determine which items in language will follow which path if both paths are possible? Or in other words, are there any inherent semantic or formational features that can predict the direction of the development? We would like to consider this question in our future studies, but also in our question-answer session. And we will be happy to hear your views in the discussion on that matter. So thank you very much for your attendance and attention. And we are looking forward to your questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to questions. Can you please raise your hands in some way? Yael, did you raise your hand? Did you just wave? No? Anything? Q&A, chat?
Hi, it's Mira. I have my hand on. So can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay, thanks. So thanks for a great talk. I love this work very much. I wanted to ask you, you have gesture and you have discourse. Isn't this the same? I mean, what do you mean by gesture as opposed to discourse? Isn't it a discourse use of a gesture? So this is one of the differences in the two processes.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and actually the question that we expected. Since we are talking about sign language, and we don't really know whether this particular usage, like we're talking about discourse usage of time pass here, is a sign or a gesture. But what we can definitely say that it shares at least a lot of features with the gestural use of time pass by hearing people. So first of all, it's used with very idiosyncratic facial expressions. It usually occupies a separate intonational phrase. It occurs just by itself, so to say, separated by pauses from the rest of the signing. It's also accompanied by particular body movements and a lot of kind of repetition, reduplication of the movement. So it behaves as a gesture, but since it's a visual modality, we can't really say whether it's a sign or a gesture. We can talk only about features and properties.
But I add something. Could I add something? It's a very interesting question. I don't think we'd want, I agree with everything that Svetlana said and the whole presentation, of course, but I don't think we want to conflate gesture and discourse. There are a lot of aspects of discourse which are conventionalized, and many of them have been discussed in this conference, whereas gesture is less conventionalized in any case, and it's less, it's more idiosyncratic. So I just want to raise the suggestion that we don't want to conflate the two. Gesture can be can be a discourse marker with speech as well, but I think we need to have clear definitions of each category.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wendy. I would like to add that when we talk about discourse usage, we talk about discourse usage, that it actually, this sign, this movement, this item connects episodes in discourse, and this way it kind of serves discourse level purposes.
Okay, maybe we have a chance for, two more questions. Vinicius Makush, am I saying your name right? I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
I was wondering, what do you think is the role of iconicity in this whole story? So it seems to me that it might be a possible confound somehow, especially when we look at the more discourse-oriented strategies and the more lexical-oriented ones. Have you looked at that in any way?
We do think that the iconicity might play a role here. We still don't know what is the exact role of iconicity, but if we don't want to claim that it's something completely unique to sign language, because we might say that it happens in spoken language as well, but it may be at a different scale. And for example, when we talk, similar processes have been suggested for spoken language intonation, where although we cannot say that it's iconic, but it's certainly motivated in some way. So usually people say about the grammaticalization of intonational patterns that come through discourse into more and more arbitrary and grammatical functions. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, and Yael?
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting talk. I have a comment and a question. I am not sure that Hopper and Traugott are on one side and Tomasello is on a different side. And the way I read Hopper and Thompson, they talk about, okay, there is movement from lexicon to grammar, but not then to discourse. What they're saying is that this movement from lexicon to grammar happens in discourse. It is because of the way people use language that the movement eventually may happen from lexicon to grammar. And that's why I'm not sure I understood your talk, because to me, they are not opposed. And the other question, or that was the comment, the question that I have is, when you're talking about this as a discourse marker, so you're talking about it happening across two episodes, or at the boundary between two narrative episodes, right? Mm-hmm. And then the smaller movement was about a conjunction. So two events conjoined by, and later this happened, right? First this happened, later this happened. So that I get. What I don't get is the last one about technology progressing. I mean, I'm missing something. Why are you talking? Okay, first of all, I don't know enough about Israeli Sign Language to see the similarity, the real similarity in the gestures here, but in terms of concept, like technology progressing, that's not about time even. So my question is, I guess I didn't understand your last one, the one about technology projection.
So maybe we can, I will start with your last question. Yeah, let me just go to the presentation if we have time. And to, second.
We have 2 minutes for the answer.
Okay, so maybe I'll just clarify that one. And I would like to show first of all, the two variants of time pass, the three variants, I'm sorry, of time pass. As you can see, just from looking at the slide, the three movements, like as they appear of the three variants, on the surface, they look quite similar. just the kind of circular movement, cyclic movement of the hands in front of the signer's body. Okay, and the third variant, as you like on the very right, it can mean advance, it can mean progress, it can mean progress or progress,
Okay, but where's the time here? The time passing.
and unfortunately, we don't have a kind of time. We don't have time to talk about this here, but it's something to think about and to develop this thought, is that the metaphorical basis of all the three variants that we see here, which actually means some kind of movement, but the kind of the move, like the where the movement happens is different. So the first signer shows movement actually in discourse. The second variant, time pass 2, shows some kind of progression through time, chronological progression. And the third variant, it can be even like, because it's lexical, it can be a very, very general, very abstract idea of progress.
But progress and advancing is from one state to another. So inherent in the semantics, you see the time pass.
Yeah, but
inherent in the semantics, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's more. It can be even more, much more abstract than just movement in, like simple movement in time or in space.